I got my double slips all laid and wired up and everything, and they've got motors in there as well. So I had to come up with a solution to my block detection dilemma if I was going to carry on and really start laying the track for the upper deck. And just briefly, if I can, the problem I've got with block detection is, say, this is all kind of dummy track really, but this is what I kind of refer to as the utility line. This will be the clockwise line on the upper deck, and there'll be an anti-clockwise line there. And these offer a route from the lower deck up the incline. All these little exchanges here offer these routes onto the upper deck. So the general idea, say an anti-clockwise train has come up, it wants to get eventually onto a line here, but it can't do that here because that would just be too many sets of points. So what it would do is it would come up across here along that double slip and onto this utility access line, which will get it round to the station, and it will get it round further. This is a bi-directional line, round further, probably over on the end somewhere where it can transfer again probably across a double slip onto the anti-clockwise line. So this becomes a passing loop really. A train intended for the station or for the anti-clockwise line can get itself onto this line and get out of the way of the two main lines, and at the same time something might want to come from the clockwise main line across and go down. And this double slip is at the heart of it. So the issue I've got with block detection is I can't say this is a block here, this passing loop, whatever it is. I can't just tag it onto the end of this line, because if I did, whenever this line was occupied, the double slip would be occupied as well. So if something has come up and it's gone onto this, which is like a passing loop, and it's stopped there because it's waiting to get across onto the anti-clockwise line, then this, as part of this block, is occupied as well. So whenever something's on this line, this is occupied, which means something can't go from the clockwise line across it, can't use it at all and get on there. So it definitely can't be part of that block. And the two double slips are actually quite close together. So I could technically maybe put a break in this line here and have all of this as part of one block and then that as part of one block, but it doesn't really fix the problem. And the problem I've got with block detection is this ends up being a very short block from there to there or there to there. And it puts a lot of dependence on resistive wheel sets, because it's okay, a loco coming across, but if it's dragging, like, you know, I've got an entire rake down here that's got plastic wheels, which would be no good, but it's so short that I'm looking at having a resistive wheel set really in coach terms on every bogie, because as the last resistive wheel set is leaving this double slip here, the next one has to come onto it for it to stay occupied, because if stuff without resistive wheel sets, if it doesn't know it's occupied, it's going to open itself up, something might come across this way and crash into it. So I got to a point where I really had to decide on if I wasn't going for current detection for this, because of the dependence on all those resistive wheel sets, and I really don't like doing resistive wheel sets, then did I have any alternatives? So then my thoughts turned to using the more positional block detection devices rather than the current detecting ones, like an infrared sensor. And I use these in the yard because trains in the yard, it's detecting that they're in a certain position rather than that they're moving through it. So infrared detection kind of worked as well for that and was easier and quicker to install. But the problem I've got with that is it works okay on the baseboards, because there's plenty of room underneath for me to stick these infrared sensors in, but they have quite a large, if I can sort of come out and get the scale of it, they're quite a large footprint. They hang down quite a long way, and these are the only ones I found that really are effective and work. So if I come across here, there is one hanging down here that I did take the two little LED bulb things off and replace with wires, and then it's just got the LED bulbs sticking through over there somewhere. That was really quite fiddly to do, and I don't fancy, and again the bulbs are still big. If I come back here, they're still, you need both of them, because I think one emits light and one detects it, that's still quite, you know, a big hole. And I don't want to be cutting great big holes in the middle of a double slip to accommodate that. It's sort of okay because these sensors are designed to be parked over. I've just moved this APT out of the way so I could film the thing, but in you know, when the APT crosses that sensor, that's when it gets stopped. So I don't mind having a bunch of ugly sensors on a yard area that's not really meant to be scenic anyway, and also they're intended to be covered up and not visible, and it's hard to see any track really in this yard anyway. But the double slips were a different matter because they could be part of a scenic area of the track, and the footprint has to be quite small if I'm using one of those positional detectors. I've been aware for a while of these available through Merg. Merg have loads of different solutions to different problems. You can download these little bags of components and solder something together that solve a problem. And they have a few different approaches even to block detection. Now this one, as opposed to the kind of the voltage detection approaches that I use on the main lines, these are much more positional, like an infrared sensor, and they cost 42p, not including postage. And the idea is you get these components and you solder them together yourself. And these are the components that come in this particular bag. The principal one really is this. This is a light dependent resistor. And the idea of this is it's a resistor, and the amount of resistance it gives is dependent on how much light is shining on the face at the top here. I think the more light that is shining on it, the higher the resistance value, and the less light, the lower. And the idea is it's a tiny little thing. It fits comfortably between two sleepers, so it just sits between the sleepers. And in normal kind of daylight, it emits a certain value, outputs a certain value, and then as a train goes across the track and covers it up, blocks the light, the value that it outputs changes, and this is how you identify that a block has been occupied or unoccupied. These are the rest of the components that come in the bag. I think this is a potentiometer, and it has this little screw hole on the top. And I think very similarly to those little screws on the infrared sensors, this has the net result of changing the sensitivity to your light levels in your room of the device. And once this is all put together, it's designed for a 12 or 5 volt supply. As the train goes over the light dependent resistor, an LED comes on to indicate that this area of track is occupied. But while an LED coming on to indicate block detection is useful, and these current detector types that I also got from Merg, these do have LEDs that indicate when they've detected occupation. But what they also have is these outputs that then go straight into whichever device I'm using, an Arduino here, and the voltage at the output allows the Arduino to then process that and use it as information that it can then pass to JMRI through MQTT to tell JMRI that the particular block that this detector is monitoring has become occupied. So I need, rather than just have that little circuit that makes an LED come on, that's all well and good, but what I need also is the communication through a microprocessor that this block is occupied and you need to let MQTT know that this block is occupied. And then I thought, well, do I need all of those extra components at all? Because it seems to me that after the output has come from the LDR, all those other components seem to be, the purpose of them together seems to be to turn that analog value into a digital one. It goes through a potentiometer so that the sensitivity can be changed. It goes through a transistor which will switch the LED on and off. I might be wrong on that because I don't understand these things all that well, but what it ends up doing is that analog value that's coming from the LDR is switched to a digital current that turns an LED on or off, and that's the digital part of it, the 1 or the 0. But these ESP32s have analog pins on them themselves and are quite accurate analog to digital converter. So I started to think, did I need all of those components at all? If I was to plug my LDR directly into an ESP32 and read its output on an analog pin, convert that to a digital value, would that give me the net result of being able to set the threshold myself of when the analog output of the LDR value drops below a certain threshold, then decide that you're occupied, and when it's above a certain threshold, decide that you're not occupied?
I had a very quick Google, soon showed me that it was possible pretty much to just use the LDR with an ESP32. I'll include a link to this website, but a very simple diagram. Plug the I think this creates what's called a circuit divider, which I'm not even going to attempt to explain, but pretty much you end up with this LDR acts as one resistor in this circuit divider, and off one of its pins we attach it to one of the analog pins on the ESP32, and we can read its resistance value from that pin. A quick word on these ESP32s, if I just increase the size of the picture. This is pretty much the one I'm using. They advertise that they come with something like 18 analog to digital converter pins, but there's a big caveat to that, which is they're kind of, I think they're in two modules. The first module, which has maybe 10 of those analog pins, you can't use if you're using Wi-Fi, and I am, so I think a lot of the analog pins that are running down here I can't use, and that only leaves about 6 that I can use, because not all of the pins sync up here, that kind of thing, and they're located up in this kind of area here. I think the 6 that I can use, and they're around 36 pin number 36, 32, and that kind of thing. So once I recreate this simple circuit on my little breadboard and get it plugged in and download, or well, copy the little bit of code that they give you here, I should be able to test this LDR.
It's a really dull day and the light's not great today, but down in this corner I have recreated that circuit. So I've got my LDR sat here, and on its first pin there's a connection here that goes into a shared voltage connection on this breadboard, and in turn the voltage goes to the 3.3 volt output from the ESP32. Similarly, on the other leg we've got a resistor, 1k resistor, was it 1k, whatever was on the diagram anyway, connecting this output pin to ground, and then in turn a ground connection off to ground on the ESP32. Then the last connection is from that same line that's got those 2 pins on it, another wire going from that line and into the input to digital converter pin on the ESP32, which in this case is pin 36. On the screen over there then I have a very simple sketch, pretty much copy and pasted. It did have a few kind of threshold values in it where it tried to judge whether it was light, bright, dark. They didn't seem to apply to my room, so I've just deleted them for absolute simplicity. So all I'm getting is every half a second it's reading the value off that pin, and I'm digitally converting it, and it's writing the numeric value that it finds. So on a really dark and murky day outside, it seems to be reading a light value around 3000 when there's nothing covering the head. So if I just take my finger in now and cover it up, that value reduces significantly, and that therefore is my threshold value. If I say, I can't actually see the values from here, but from testing, I think it's around a 3000 mark when it's not covered, and then when it's fully covered, it's probably around 1000, is it? So I'd be saying, okay, next step in my sketch then is to, instead of just constantly output this numeric value, read the value, make a judgment based on it, which would be, say, 2500 is my threshold. So if the number read is above 2500, then I report unoccupied. If it's below 2500, then I report occupied. With a view then to this becoming something useful in JMRI or with JMRI, I've converted the kind of very basic sketch into something that's perhaps halfway towards being something that can be used with MQTT and JMRI. I've created a class for the LDR. I've added some debounce code into it and a threshold as well. So effectively, when defining an LDR up here, all I say is this is my JMRI ID. This is just a name I give it. This is the pin it's on. This is its light threshold. So this is the point where below this value it is occupied, and above this value it is unoccupied, and these are debounce values. So I think a 300 here and a 0 here means it has I think a debounce to off of 300 milliseconds, and on is instant. The reason why I've put debounce in it is it's analog read. Every now and again I don't want an incorrect reading, just a one-off incorrect reading, to change its value. So it has to be consistently below that threshold for 300 milliseconds in order for the state to change. So now it's just a case of getting the console window back up. There's no constant output anymore. We're not printing that analog value constantly anymore. We're just inputting it, processing it, and acting on it if it is deemed to have changed. Back over here on the circuit then, we've got that threshold value. So the idea would be that at the minute it's unoccupied, and if I bring my finger towards the sensor like this, we get a change to active. Release it, there's a short delay, so straight to active when I put my finger over it, and just that slightly noticeable delay to inactive when I release it. But that's effectively, at least on the test bed, block detection or occupancy detection. And once I was certain that all I really needed was the LDR and none of the rest of the kit, I just bought a bag full of these from China. I think I got 60 delivered for under £5. So there's no need to keep bothering Merg for all those kits now. I think all I really need is one of these and one resistor per sensor. Now got my resistor semi-insulated enough to survive, I think. So next job is to get it through a hole in the middle of this double slip. I also need to do something with the ends because they're ultimately going to need to connect to a DuPont pin header. I'm hoping that these cables are long enough that I can DuPont terminate them once they're through the hole. The ones on the other side weren't, so what I did was I terminated the little metal clips to the end of the cables because they're still pretty slim, and then fed them through that way, and that way I could just put the little square plastic clips over the top of them once they were under, because the plastic clips are too big to go through that hole. Time for drilling then. What I have been doing actually is I've got this old double slip that came, I don't know, with a train set or something. It must be like 30 years old, this one. It's still a Pico one. It's a little bit different to the ones that are in. It would probably still work, but I'm buying new ones for the layout just in case. But it does give me a chance at least to kind of practice with my drill bits and make sure I've got one that'll go through between the sleepers without, and this one's very tight, without damaging them. Yeah, it doesn't like this. Very carefully and slowly lets it through. Much more comfortable if I don't tangle the wires around the camera. I'm definitely in. As it heads down now, I really have to try to... The sensor isn't quite square, it is slightly rectangular, so it's important. Now this is where the tricky bit is, as I try and get the slightly wider cables through. Oh, we're in. So I need to try and keep it as it goes through here. That kind of, oh, that's gone in well. Come on, just a little bit this way, and you're there. I'm reluctant to go and give it a tug from down below. I think the problem here is I didn't quite make the hole in the middle. I did solder together down here just a little board that supports the LDRs, and there's a little interface between the ESP32 and the LDRs. So it's just I think because there are only 6 analog pins per ESP32, this just supports 6 connections. So it's got the resistors needed, it's got some useful DuPont header pins so that I can just connect cables here and there, and it shares the ground and 3.3 volt in order to connect 6 LDRs up to 1 ESP32. So just a small modification then to that sensor class I'd already written to handle a threshold, and say if the number it's getting is above that threshold, then it's inactive, and if it's below because the light's dim, then it's active. I should now be able to, if I just kind of put my hand over here somewhere, the sketch is recognizing that when my hand is covering the thing, it's active. If I take it away, it's inactive. There's some debounce in there as well, which I'd already written anyway for those current sensors, so it handles a bit of flickering. And also, again, the timeout's important because the sensor is right in the middle of the turnout, so I do want a second or two to let anything that's traveling across get past. The next block will start here, I'll be back to current detection then, so just a little bit of time to allow anything that clears this thing. And also you've got the breaks between coaches as well, that it'll get brighter as there's just a couple of couplings covering it, so it just needs that little bit of timeout time to make sure that everything's cleared before it goes inactive again. And with that LDR class embedded into an ESP32 sketch that's actually talking to MQTT, once I've got the threshold bit of code written and it's doing that transition from 0 to 1, then from that point onwards it can just be treated as a sensor in the same way as any other sensor, infrared or current detector, is treated. So by the time it gets into JMRI, it is just another sensor that can be assigned to denote block occupancy on a given, in this case, double slip. Once that's done, then it's just a simple case of testing it by shifting a wagon to run over the top and block the light on the LDR, and I can see there on the panel that the double slip occupancy has gone. So I'm going to try and give this a push down to test the other one as well. That was very unsuccessful, so I'm going to go the long way around. Same test over on this one then, just roll it gently this time over so that it occupies the sensor and covers it up. And again, I can see that occupancy for this double slip on this end going to occupied in JMRI on the panel. And from everything I've tested, everything I'm aware of, this is for a particularly short block. I think this is maybe the best solution I can come up with. For a longer block, for all the long blocks that want to track movement of trains, I'm using current detectors. I just do think this is a little bit short and prone to issues for a normal current detector. And if a positional sensor like an infrared sensor or an LDR will do the job, then that's what I'm going to go with. Of course, a compromise here with an LDR is, as I start getting this layout more scenic, I might want it to run it in the dark, and you know, have the layout lit by LEDs and more scenic lighting. I think in those circumstances I'm going to have to be quite tactical. I can maybe have more than one threshold, certainly in the class, so a kind of full light threshold and a low light threshold. But even taking that into account, I think I'll have to be a bit tactical and maybe have some scenic LEDs very close to this to these sensors, so that there is a decent amount of light to be blocked when trains and coaches go over them. I'm not entirely sure I'll have that much more use for those LDRs throughout the layout. All of the yard is kind of done now with infrared sensors, and they're fixed and pretty much working okay. And the rest of the normal site blocks will be handled by current detector type detectors. But I have been starting to think about stations now, and how I'm going to make the main station, which will be over there, kind of interesting and functional. And I will cover this in another video, but I ended up, when I really thought about it, kind of needing a little branch line station somewhere to sort of make the main station functional, purposeful and interesting. And station platforms kind of got me thinking about automation and how I'll get trains to stop where I want them to when they're on a platform. And I think that might be another use for LDRs going forward, just having them planted between the sleepers, kind of at a point where I would want, say, a short train to stop. I mean, obviously this will be all short trains, but on a longer platform where I'd want short trains to stop, where I'd want long trains to stop. So although there isn't a massive use for them, I think, on this layout, they will occasionally come in handy.